This conference will now be recorded.
Okay.
Hey, Mike,
Yeah.
David Dilger. Is there a chat feature on this software like there is on Zoom?
There is if you somewhere on your page, you'll find a little bubble like a conversation circle.
Okay.
And you could type into that if you want to. Otherwise, you can just join in here since I'm not going to mute everybody. Okay. Let me start here with this slide, and I hope a lot of you had a chance to download the support documents because they make a great way to sort of take notes. And there's also some documents here that don't show up real well on a computer screen that I'll be referring to that were in that package. So let me start with the importance of the treasurer. You know, I got to tell you a story. When I became club president, I was kind of thrown into the job in the Des Moines Club, and you know, I was young and I felt kind of heady, like, well, I'm pretty important. So I started asking some questions, and my first question was, I said, well, exactly how many members do we have? So I asked that of the membership vice president, and the membership vice president told me, well, you better talk to the treasurer because the treasurer knows that answer. I said, okay. And then I heard that somebody had quit, and I wanted to know why they quit. And I asked the membership vice president again and said, well, you ought to talk to the treasurer because I think the treasurer talked to him. And then I asked, well, at last year's priest appreciation cookout, did we make money or lose money, and how much did we charge? And somebody said, well, you ought to talk to the treasurer. And after a while, it became apparent to me that I was not the most important person in the club. That the treasurer was the only one that really had all the facts and figures. So I think that that's important to recognize, and I think that more Serrans need to recognize that, is that the treasurer has become sort of the go-to person for facts. Both membership, roster, and count, why members quit. And the treasurer often finds that out because they're out trying to collect the dues, and somebody says, well, I'm not going to pay because I'm going to drop out. Here's the reason why. They also have a good idea of what funds are available for new projects and requests. They can provide a financial history of past events. And, you know, in a lot of ways, the club treasurer becomes sort of the club archivist, although that's not an official duty. But there's sort of a person that you can go to ask, did we ever try this and did it ever work? So it's a really important position. And I want to just ask everybody to recognize that right up front, the important role that you have. Okay. We've kind of laid out the primary responsibilities of the treasurer into 3 categories here, and we're going to cover each of these in detail tonight. The first one we call financial, and we break that down into transactions, financial transactions, reporting, planning, budgeting, and guidance, and also records retention, which is oftentimes overlooked. The second area we're going to talk about is annual tax filing for nonprofit status. And there may be some of you out there that are saying, you know, well, I don't do that. Somebody else in the club does. And we understand that in our own Des Moines club, I think a lot of times we have a tax attorney who actually prepares the tax returns, but it's pretty much the treasurer that makes sure that that gets done. So that's a treasurer responsibility, even if they don't do it directly. And third is the Serra portal maintenance, including the membership list and information, and also the current officers, which is really important. And again, this is one in a lot of clubs where that duty may be split between the president and the treasurer, but those are the 2 people that typically have the information to plug into the portal there. So that's kind of an overview of what we're going to talk about tonight. So let's look first at financial functions and the transactions. You know, this is pretty basic. I don't think it's going to surprise anybody here. In terms of the most important thing is probably to collect member dues. We're actually going to have a little discussion on that towards the end of the session here. But it's basically comes down to 2 things: issuing due statements to members and invoices. And it's usually, most clubs do that on a 6-month basis, so it's twice a year. And then, of course, the treasurer is in charge of paying all the approved club expenses. And one of the most important there to pay is the U.S. and Serra International dues, which are paid twice a year, January 15th and July 15th. And there are some, if you're in a region that has regional fees, like the central region where I'm from has always had regional fees, the treasurer also pays that. Third is to receive and timely deposit payments and donations to the club. Pretty obvious. Fourth is to reconcile bank accounts and balance checkbooks monthly. And we'll show some examples of how that's done. It doesn't have to be super sophisticated. If it can be really basic and still meet the goal there. Fifth here is to talk about managing and reporting on club savings and investment accounts if the club has any. And finally, to manage the banking relationship. And there are some important points here about the banking relationship. While the treasurer maintains the relationship with a specific bank should be approved annually by the board of trustees of the club. That's one of the, I think, stipulations in the bylaws. Here's another important one that was just added to the bylaws, but it's very important, is to make sure that there was always more than one authorized signer on the club's accounts. And that's because we've had situations where treasurers become incapacitated for some reason, and all of a sudden the club finds that it doesn't have any ability to access its funds or to really carry on as it's going. So it's important to always have more than one authorized signer on the bank accounts for the club. And finally, an important goal is just to keep the board apprised of banking fees, charges, and interest. Of course, there hasn't been much interest recently. It seems like most of it is just fees and charges, but that's still important to keep the board apprised of those things. So those are transactions. We're going to go next. This is just a slide for your reference. I think all of you know this, but this is the statement of the current semi-annual dues due to Serra International and US Serra. For a full member, it's $46, and Serra International and the US Serra have combined the invoice at this point, and of that $46, $23.50 goes to Serra International, and the balance goes to Serra US. And then it's half of that for spouses and under 35. The invoices from Serra International, there's one invoice that comes out from Serra International, and it goes to clubs in June and December, and clubs are asked to make that payment by July 15th and January 15th.
Hey, Mike, can you take a straw poll and see what the annual dues are for some of these clubs in the U.S., please?
You know, I'll tell you what, is this David?
Yes.
Yeah, let me make a note of that, David. When we get to a discussion point, I will, okay?
Okay, thank you.
You're looking for what dues clubs charge?
Annually.
Annual dues, okay? Yeah, it's quite, there's quite a divergence there. Okay, let's go to the reporting, the financial functions on reporting. And these really come down to each board meeting. And you know, your club may have monthly board meetings, or it may have quarterly board meetings. I think most clubs have a quarterly board meeting. So basically what the reporting function comes down to is to report on income and disbursement since the last report, whenever the last board meeting was. And then to report on the financial outcome of special club events since the last report. An example might be, for example, in the Des Moines Club, we have typically done, the pandemic here has kind of put a kibosh on that for the while, but we've typically done a bishop's appreciation dinner and a priest's appreciation dinner, a seminarian appreciation lunch, and then a sister's appreciation dinner. And usually there is a report on whatever we're doing on those to say, did we make money? Did we lose money? How many people participated? Whatever it might be there. So I just think it's important for the future planning of the club to have somebody that keeps track of whether or not the club came out ahead or behind in that, because it means we may have to adjust either expenses or the charging that we did for those events. Provide a bank reconciliation. Now, I've got an example of this on page 2A, and this is thanks to Bill Cook. Bill Cook is the treasurer of the Des Moines Club. He was on the team that helped me put this together, and I just wanted to reference it. You know, you guys probably, I think, understand this even better than I do, but I guess the real point I wanted to make with this is that you don't have to be fancy in terms of being a Serra treasurer here. So this is one example of a report that Bill gives at the for a period of time. Basically, this is for the looks like the third quarter, September 1st to December 31st, and it gives you some idea of what happened, what the checkbook balance started with, and what it ended with there. So it's a really important thing. And I have there's also a 2B here, which is another example, and this is from Jane Herrera, who is the treasurer of the Lehigh Valley Serra Club in Bethlehem, Pennsylvania. And she does it a little fancier there, but you can see there that basically it's the same thing. It starts with a balance and it ends with a balance, and it shows all the activity in between. Now, there's one thing, this is kind of an important thing that I'd like to push here tonight. I'm really encouraging every treasurer at every board meeting to provide an exact copy of the most recent bank statement that shows the balance to the board. We don't really do an audit in Serra. We're supposed to in Serra clubs, but to be honest, volunteers don't want to spend their Saturday morning going through a checkbook register, and it just doesn't get done. And so the idea of the bank statement is, that if the treasurer says there's $2,000 in the account, the bank statement ought to be somewhere close to that. I mean, it can be off by a little bit because of the timing of checks and deposits, but it's a great idea to show that exact copy. And I just want to tell you, nobody here questions the honesty of our treasurers, but we don't want to challenge it either. And there actually was an example about 10 years ago, I'm told, where a club treasurer said there was $6,000 in the account, $5,000 in the account. And he basically reported that at every single meeting. And then the treasurer fell into a severe health problem. And when they went to check it out, there was only $500 in the account. And, I think had somebody seen the actual bank statements, I think it would have prevented that problem. I'm happy to report I heard that all the money was recovered so that no money was lost to that club. But I think it's sort of a rudimentary, effective way to do a sort of a basic audit to make sure that what the treasurer says is there really is there. So I want to encourage you to provide an exact copy of the most recent bank statement when you attend and report at a board meeting. And then finally, there's reporting on any donations that are received. That's one of the functions of the treasurer. And basically, if there's a donation for $250 or over, it's important for you to send a letter to the donor, not only thanking them, but using this kind of magic tax language that lets them take the donation as a charitable contribution on their tax form. And it uses these words: no goods or services were provided to the donor in return for this gift. And I have an example here from the Des Moines Club. Bill Cook gave me one of our Serrans there, and you can see that language is the last line of it. So it's a real simple letter, but it's important if people want to take a charitable contribution if the amount is $250 or more. Okay.
So nobody's really been saying it, but I don't know that the documents are being shared. We see the main slides, but when you're showing the supplemental documents, I don't think we're seeing those.
No, I can't show those, guys. That's why I really encouraged everybody to download and print these.
Oh, got it. Okay.
They're too fine. They're too fine to show up on a screen anyway. So they're just meant to give examples of how people do it and just how simple it is there.
Privacy issues.
No privacy issues. It's just a matter of how much you can really effectively show on a screen here.
Don't be showing my bank account, Mike.
Mike,
Okay,
did you
let's
say?
see. Let's go on here to yes.
Did you say that the financials should be shown, like if you have a board meeting every month, that they should be shown every month or quarterly?
Well, there should be a financial report every time the board meets. So if you meet monthly, I think there should be one monthly.
Okay, thank you.
Now, it doesn't have to be extensive. Like if you look back at the examples there, from Jane Herrera, which is 2A and 2B, they're just one-page documents, and that was basically for a quarter, so there's going to be a lot fewer entries on that. But what I'm really recommending is, I think most people will ask for that and expect that. What I'm really asking is that you have an exact copy of the checking account statement that says what the balance is in the bank. And I think that would be good to share at every board meeting. That makes sense, Candace?
Yeah.
Michael Homer Radford, my comment is this actually provides a certain amount of peace of mind for the treasurer over a period of time, having the same treasurer year after year, which is not uncommon, but having that kind of clarity, and again, it's transparency, and I think it would be a comforting thing to the treasurer to know that there is no question. But
yep, I totally agree, and I think it's a lot simpler than going through a check by check audit, which I don't think is really going to ever happen in Serra. So, okay, let's look at item 3 here. Go ahead. Somebody have a question or comment?
I do have a question. Who are you referring to as the board? Are you considering that to be the total membership?
No,
or are you consider it to
there's
be
actually
the trustees?
Yeah, the board of the club is actually managed by a board of trustees, and that would consist of the president, a president-elect if you have one, a past president, and then for sure the 4 vice presidents of membership, vocations, programs, and communications, a secretary possibly, and usually those people are designated and they meet separately from the membership. Typically once a quarter, like I said, where the membership may meet once a month. And they may meet before or after a membership meeting, but they do meet separately. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I just needed a clarification because we meet monthly.
Even with your board.
Huh?
Yeah, your board does.
The board meets monthly in preparation for the monthly membership meeting.
Okay.
So
Yes.
that's just how we function. And so
yeah,
I
and
usually,
there's a lot of clubs that do that.
and I've gotten someone else to reconcile my books as to go along with what you're saying.
Yeah, it's
so
kind of a
that
check.
I have security that I'm doing it right and that I'm not making any mistakes.
Yeah, that's
And
a great
so
idea
it's
too.
the CPA that's doing that and it's doing the reconciliation of the bank statement.
That's another way to accomplish the same thing. I think you're safe there.
Hey, Mike's Bob Camney.
Bob?
Hey,
let me introduce Bob. Bob is the U.S. Council Treasurer, and if you don't know him, he's been instrumental in helping bail us out with all of our IRS troubles. He basically there should be a halo that appears anytime you see his picture here, but he's done enormous work to get a lot of clubs out of trouble with the IRS. And he was also one of the instrumental players on putting this training together. So go ahead, Bob.
Through my district governor time, I learned, and in fact, visiting with clubs through the course of the country on the 990 issue, it just reaffirms that so many clubs do things differently. And so what we're going through in this webinar is a guide. There's nothing, it says in here, you have to meet monthly or don't or whatever. It's a guide. And, this is a fiscal responsibility guide in the sense of that bank statement and a reconciliation to be passed around. That's just, so don't be concerned if you're not doing it, but this is a guide perhaps to give you some kind of bank board on what you as a club should be doing.
Right. Okay, I'm just looking through some of the questions here. I'll try to take a break here when we get done with these financial functions and answer some of the questions that have got piled up. So the third area is kind of budgeting or planning and guidance. And, I put down here that in terms of budgeting, a lot of clubs don't actually do an annual budget. They kind of use the prior year as a de facto budget. So they just report on how we do this year versus last. But the clubs that do actually do an annual budgeting do rely on the treasurer to help with that, because the treasurer has the records usually that are critical. And then there's also, treasurers get pretty well involved in most of the financial events, financial planning for special events, like I mentioned our priest appreciation cookout and our bishop's appreciation dinner. They keep track of what we spent last year, what the caterer charged, if there was a catering involved, what we charged Serrans, how much we got in donations. And I think that they're usually relied on to be sort of a critical element in deciding, do we need to adjust the pricing in the coming year? And then I have a last line here, regional conventions, if any. I don't know how many of you have regional conventions in the regions that you're in. There are 9 regions in the U.S. And I'm actually the director for the Central region, and we do typically have a regional convention, and we charge clubs for that. And our charge is basically $4 per Serran, $2 for a spouse or a person under 35. And that money is not sent to the U.S. Serra or to Serra International. It's actually sent to, in my case, to my club treasurer, who is kind of also the treasurer for the region while I'm the regional director. So if you do have regional conventions, that the treasurer is often really critical in that particular role. And a lot of times that rotates between the same clubs 8 to 10 years between there. So, okay. Let's move ahead here. And then the final area of financial functions is records retention. And this was a recommendation since there was some unclarity about how long records should be retained. And I think that our team came up with this recommendation, is to basically retain records for 5 years. And that would include your year-end income and disbursement reports, your bank records, membership records, and tax filings, to keep those for at least 5 years. And then like I said, there are some special club events like a regional convention that get rotated every 8 or 9 years between clubs. If you do that, then you want to be sure to keep those records, because they become invaluable when it comes to planning a next regional convention and deciding what worked and what didn't the last time there. So. Okay, and then I just want to finish here with a sort of a practicality note. In terms of these financial functions, it's really important to keep things simple. And I would tell you that most clubs basically just use a checkbook register to pull things together. And they use a simple handwritten income and expense statement. Some people put into an Excel spreadsheet or something, and they use the most recent bank statement for current funds balances. There are other clubs that are a lot more sophisticated. They use, they can use Excel, they can use Quicken, they can use QuickBooks or other. And there are actually a few clubs where the treasurer oftentimes is a CPA or a retired CPA, and they may use some proprietary accounting software that they're used to. We strongly discourage that if at all possible. It's probably easier at the start for the person who is the treasurer, but the problem is it's almost impossible to transfer to whoever the next treasurer is going to be there. So actually, the simpler you can keep this, I think the better. And that's our recommendation there. Okay, and then we're going to finish with some tips, and then we'll be done with this financial function area. The first one is, these are ideas that the team that helped me put this together came up with to recommend to you. And I think the first one is really valuable. Encourage members to pay annually. We typically invoice semi-annually every 6 months, because that's the way that we're invoiced by Serra International and Serra US. But if you can get people to pay annually, it saves you work and it saves them work. And it's also important, I think, to, when you do issue invoices, to try to say what you can to say what those invoices have accomplished in the past. And I have an example here on page 3A, which is also from Bill Cook, our club treasurer, who's on the line. And you can see that he does a couple of things there. We'll talk about one of these in a minute, but at the bottom, he's got 2020 highlights, and he just talks about, what we were able to do in terms of use of the dues in terms of the Serra mission. So I think it's an important time to kind of sell it and just let people know it isn't all just going to Serra International and Serra US, although they're doing wonderful things with it, like the serraspark.org website. But the clubs usually accomplish some pretty amazing things with those dues. A second one is to include a request for special donations on the membership invoice. And I think that do I have that here? I think that's also on 3.8. No. Anyway, but there are special programs, like in the Des Moines Club, we give a $50 birthday card with $50 check to each of the seminarians, and we're able to do that. We sponsor that whole program through extra donations on top of the dues that the club charges. And David was asking, I'll just let you know, since we're talking so much about the Des Moines Club, it's my club. We charge $120 in annual dues. So, about $92 of that goes to Serra US and Serra International. And then there's another $9 that goes to the regional funds. So anyway, but you can see on page 3A how Bill integrates that into his invoice, and it works very effectively. Even though we don't have much left from the basic charges, we do quite well in terms of donations from folks. And then also it's a good thing to request if people can help with dues for those who can't afford. Okay, then the third one is encourage when you do a club invitation to a special event. And I have an example here, page 3B. That was our appreciation picnic in 2019. This was at a local state park. And if you see the portion at the bottom on that page 3B, the very last line, we include this at Bill Cook's recommendation on every single invitation we send out. It says, I am unable to attend, but have enclosed a donation in the amount of, and you would be surprised how many people will give there to try and help offset the costs of a priest's meal or a sister's meal, whatever the event's going to be there. So, and then we have annually encourage members to consider a bequest in their estate plan towards the Serra Club. And that probably parallels somewhat what some people do in terms of the Serra Foundation. So just a question of whether you want to give locally or to the foundation itself. And then this last point is a really good one. Is Joe Grazioso on? Joe is the treasurer for the St. Petersburg Club, and he was on our team. And he told me that he ended up taking on the job when the treasurer got seriously ill. He said he just got thrown into it, and he said there was just no records, no information of anything, and he says it was just kind of a disaster from the start. And as a result, what he does now is he keeps a backup notebook, and that includes all the bank account numbers and the key passwords and the passwords to the IRS and the state websites that they have. So in case anything happens to him, that information is represented there. So that's I think that's a good practical piece of information and a suggestion there for folks. It probably isn't a bad idea that you might even have that backup notebook be held by the person who is the other signatory on the checking account. I think that would be ideal. Okay. Okay, we're going to move on to annual tax filing for nonprofit status. But before we do, I want to try to answer some of the questions here. Let me see if I can dig them up. And then we'll go to David's request that if people would share kind of their annual dues. So let's see. Let me start at the top here. Okay, we're going to poll on the annual dues. I'll handle that. Here's a question from Alice to everyone. Are dues billed in advance or in arrears? And I think almost typically the answer is that they're billed in advance. Does any member of my panel have a disagreement on that?
Mike, this is Bob Kemney again. It's a practical answer in my regard, because many clubs don't, some clubs don't have a lot of balance. So you always want to collect up front. That's the practical side of it. And that way somebody, just doesn't forget it. I mean, I just always suggest bill them up front. That's the easiest way and a good way to convert to if you're not already doing that.
Right. Here's a question from Joe Osterbauer. He asked, where can we download the supporting documents for this meeting? Joe, Joseph, they were actually part of the invitation that you should have received Friday and today. It would have said on there, click here to download documents. But if you can't find that invitation, you can go to the serraus.org website, and there's a tab there called Leadership. If you click on that leadership tab on the home page, you drop down and get a menu selection and choose District Governor. And on the District Governor page, you will find, if you scroll down a little bit on the right side, you'll find both the PowerPoints eventually and the recording and the link to the document if you want to get those. Okay. Here's a question from Catherine Walton out in California. And Catherine is asking about, is your tax attorney paid, or does the attorney volunteer the services for the annual tax filing for the club? Bill Cook, I think you could tell me, but I'm pretty sure that the people that do that for us do it for free, don't they?
Yeah, Mike, we have a couple of members that are CPAs and attorneys, and they do it without any charge.
Yep. Actually, when we get into this, you're going to find that the tax filing has substantially simplified here, Catherine. So I think it'll become less and less of an issue what that costs. Let's see here. Got some people that need links.
Mike, this is Candace. I want to say that we charge $95 a year, and I think that is a problem with some clubs, why people drop out, because the dues are too high. So our club actually works out very well. Hal's on the call. I think we have 166 or 167 members now in our club.
Okay, but Candace, your $95, that barely pays Serra International and Serra US. Is that in addition to the Serra International and Serra US dues?
We pay $95 for each member, spouse also.
Oh, per 6 months, right? Per 6 months.
No, for a year. $95 for a year for the spouse and the husband and wife each.
So does that include food?
No, it doesn't.
Okay.
We just have people volunteer to bring snacks normally when we meet for our meetings.
Okay, good enough. Just let me figure one other thing out here, and then we'll go take this poll here. Ron Helms from the Council Bluffs Club has suggested that we not forget required minimum distributions from older members drawing IRAs and pension funds. Ron, would you want to say anything more about that? I'm not familiar with that myself, if you're on.
Well, yeah, we have, in the last 3 years, we have received gifts from members drawing on their required minimum distributions. According to the IRS, though, the gift, in order to be tax deductible to the member, has to come from their investment person or bank directly to the club. It doesn't pass through. So every treasurer should learn a little bit about that and encourage that, especially when the average age of our club is about 70 years old. So
right.
But it's been worth $1,500 to $2,000 a year in gifts.
Oh, that's worthwhile. Does everybody understand that? Any questions about that?
This is Jane Herrera, but I might comment. But if one makes a charitable distribution, you cannot claim that as a tax deduction, though. You don't get a tax deduction for that.
Right. It offsets your income, doesn't it? if it's from
Yes.
your IRA?
It offsets your income, but you can't claim it as a tax deduction. But
Fair enough.
on the other hand, no taxes are taken out of it. So in other words, the entire amount goes to the recipient. It's not taxed.
Yeah.
The other issue on that, Mike, is that usually the person drawing required minimum distributions is at a relatively low tax bracket anyway.
Right.
So, and probably not filing the itemized deductions. So it would have been a lost deduction anyway. This way it's a pass through and it does not have to be counted as income.
That's a great idea, Ron. Thanks for sharing that. Okay, with that, I'm trying to think of an organized way to do this, but let's just try. If those that are willing to share, now I
Hey,
see the
Bill.
Downtown Washington Serra Club.
Hey,
Washington,
Bill,
DC.
can I ask a question?
Yes, go ahead.
Or Mike, my question is when you ask about the dues, could you also ask how frequently clubs are meeting and if meals are included in the meeting?
Yeah, that's going to be, I think it's going to be too much information for tonight, but I did provide some information in one of the prior sessions, the very first session. You know, we recently did a mail survey of club presidents, and we had about half of the clubs respond. And I think that 40% of the clubs charge for food. 60% do not charge for food, if that helps you some. But just for now, let's take about 5 minutes and just let people, if they want to, speak out. And I already have from Alice here, Downtown Washington Serra Club, Washington, D.C. charges $120. Let's see, it just bounced here. Per year, per individual, and $150 for joint husband and wife members. Okay, Tom Russell from Omaha, let's see. We just answered that question. Catherine Walton, her club meets monthly. They charge $288 per year. Includes 12 lunches and the Serra US and Serra International dues. Janet Zukovic, you know, this is a good way to do it. If you guys could use the chat feature, the little bubble. Colorado Springs charges $120 a year, spouses are half. So I'm guessing there's no food in that. Mary Anderson from Serra Club of Williamson County, Tennessee. There's a monthly potluck dinner meeting and $112 per year, full member dues. Julie, I'm not sure what club Julie's from, but it's $300 per year and it includes 24 breakfasts. Julie, I might have to join your club. I love breakfast. Frank Hartje from North Columbus, Ohio. They charge $150 annual and lunch is not included. Stephen Dickus. Let's see, you guys are going too fast for me. My thing is scrolling. Let's see here. I'm losing everybody. Here we go. Serra Club of Omaha charges $420 a year. That's 24 meetings a year and meals are included. Get back here. Frank Boos, Northeast Fort Worth, $200 annual, no meals. Everybody's popping on here. I wish there was a way I could record this. Mary Elwood, Northeast Fort Worth, charges $200 annual, no food. Let's see here. I'm going to have to move on here pretty quick. Kathleen Ahern, Mankato, Minnesota, charges $126.67 yearly, no meals. Owatonna, Minnesota, charges $115. Be no meals, I'm sure. Adam Laura is down in McAllen, Texas, $240 a year for a joint, no meals. Linda Ulanday, Lexington, Kentucky, $150 a year, no meals. Harold Perez, Fresno, California, $160 per year, and spouses half of that, meals not included. Ed Lupton, San Buenaventura, $188 per year, dinner twice a month included. Okay, that gives you a little bit of flavor there. With that, I think we're going to move on. Hopefully that gives you some idea of the ranges there, but they range basically from about $400 to $500 if meals are included, down to about, it sounds like the low one might be Candace's Club at $95 a year. So, okay, let's go to the next slide. We're going to shift here and talk about the annual tax filing. And this first slide here is just kind of a basic, why is it important to maintain your nonprofit status? And I think most of you know this. But the most important is probably that it allows donors to write off contributions as charitable contributions. The second one is it prevents clubs or members from having to pay the excess of income over expense if it's not tax exempt. The reality is that's probably not going to happen, but it technically could. And finally, an important reason is if clubs are using the SI group exemption, it protects the SI's, Serra International's nonprofit exemption. So that's why it's important. So how do you maintain the nonprofit status of a club? It comes down to three things. Annually file the correct IRS Form 990, and we're going to talk about which form that is in a second. The filing must be by the 15th day of the 5th month following the fiscal year end. And most clubs have a fiscal year end of May 31st, which means that the correct 990 must be filed by October 15th. That's kind of a hard and fast deadline there if you're a May 31st year end. And then Bob Campney asked me to put this in. We've had a lot of confusion and problems with the IRS recently because of some classification changes they made on us. They've been fairly lenient up to now, but they've made it clear that they are going to begin again now that we've got that stuff cleared up with late filing penalties, and they're fairly stiff. If you look at this, you can expect the IRS to begin again to charge $25 a day for every day you're late in filing the correct Form 990. And they're going to be tough. They've told us they're going to be tough to attain a waiver, and ignorance is not going to be an excuse there. So that's what it takes to maintain nonprofit status. Now let's talk about the 990 form. Which one? There are a couple of issues on the 990. Bob Campney has absolutely done all the work on this, and I'm just reporting what he's already pulled together. But we had a number of clubs that lost their nonprofit status. Actually, I think we had somewhere around 80 clubs or so. And at the current time, we have filed on 59 clubs, and 52 have had their nonprofit status reinstated. We're still awaiting approval on another 7, but we expect that to happen. So there's still 23 clubs yet to pursue to get their nonprofit status corrected. And I think in most cases that those clubs just need to sort of engage with Bob to make that happen. And then there's a separate issue, the reclassification. Some time back, the IRS on its own changed the classification of Serra clubs to supporting. And what it did is it made it, in most cases, it made it impossible for most clubs to use the Easy 990N, which is sort of an electronic postcard. And it made them use the 990EZ, which is a substantially more complicated tax form. Bob got the IRS to change that recently, so that our clubs are no longer considered supporting. And as a result of that, the new 990 filing rule is that a club can file the 990N, which I think takes no more than 8 or 10 minutes. We have some stuff on that, and Bob can comment. It's kind of a quick postcard type, if their annual revenue is under $50,000. And most clubs fall into that category. So let's take a look here at the 990 filing guides in. Now you have attached, this would be an important reason to download these documents today. Bob has a 3-page guidelines, and I think he's actually shared this with a lot of clubs at this point. But it basically is the guidance for filing a 990N. It's fairly straightforward. It's on pages 5A, 5B, and 5C. And I'm not going to spend a lot of time going through that, but I would tell you that Bob's been just a champion on this, and he'd be more than willing to take any questions if you have any. So, like I said, the great victory that Bob achieved here is that about 95% of our clubs can now use this very simple, easy filing, which basically just comes down to saying, you know, somebody has to certify that we had $50,000 or less than $50,000 in gross receipts. Now, there are still a few clubs that have not been properly updated. Bob's working to correct that. And if you have any questions for your club, I've got his name, his email, and his phone number down there. Bob, do you want to say anything else about that?
No, you covered it well. Just understand, even though we have that reinstatement from a 2004 date, there's still a dozen or so clubs out there, and I've learned to get access to an IRS master file. And there's also a Pub 78. If any of you have ever been involved in saying, is this a charitable deduction entity that we might be looking up? They've got two different files, and in those files, not everything is right. There's things that are wrong, and I guess I will tell you not everything's right. I will tell you I have access. It's not particularly easy, but I absolutely can chase down issues that any of you have. Sometimes it's easy, sometimes it's not. But I literally am happy to. You contact me, I will figure out what the issue is, try to work with you, and if I need to, I'll contact the IRS directly and get your club status properly stated.
Great, thanks, Bob. I'm going to move on to the next slide here, which is, losing nonprofit status. It can happen if you go 3 consecutive years without filing the correct IRS 990 form. So that can still happen. And if you fall into that category, you're going to have to file a form called 1023 and pay $275. And again, Bob would be a great resource for anybody that runs into that issue here. Okay, this next slide is it's a little bit out of place. I don't know exactly where, we didn't know exactly where to put it, but it's just something I want to comment on. It's not tax related, but some Serra clubs are formed as an association. In fact, most are. Few are formed as corporations. And there are some states that actually don't give you any option. For example, I'm told by John Liston that Ohio, New York, and Florida require all nonprofits to actually become corporations. But by and large, most states don't require that. And we recommend that clubs not file as a corporation when they start. This is just be a question. I think it's actually part of the, is it part of the 990N and the 990EZ, Bob? They have to answer whether you're an association or corporation. Bob, you're muted.
I'm sorry. When I file for reinstatement, I have to make that decision. I mean, I have to assert for that club they're a corporation or an association. I didn't even know what that meant when I got into this. So by and large, all our clubs for ease are associations. That means they're not a trust, and that means they're not a corporation. So effectively, the definition is everybody else is an association.
Right. And the reason you want to try to stay away from corporation if you can is that there's usually an annual or a biannual requirement to file with the Secretary of State where you're located if you're a corporation. There is no such requirement if you're an association. And the problem is that with all volunteer organizations, there's a lot of turnover. So while they may be sending notices to the person they thought was the contact of your club, that person either may not be the contact anymore or may have moved, and you're not getting the notice. So it's just an opportunity to get tripped up. It's not a big deal if you have to do it. It just basically requires you to put the address of the company or the corporation and a list of the officers. Okay, I'm going to skip past that one here. We're going to talk about another kind of loose subject here, liability insurance. And I just want to make you aware that As part of your dues, the U.S. Council provides for liability insurance for club events. There's a lot of times if you're going to meet in a church basement or a church facility, that the church may require that they be named as covered in liability insurance. And it's especially true whenever there's alcohol being served, I found. But you can actually go to this link and sign up at no cost for specific club functions. I think the key is to make sure that the church where you're going to hold it or the school, whatever it's going to be, is actually named also as covered by the liability insurance. Okay, portal maintenance. I'm not going to spend a whole heck of a lot of time on this because I think most of you have probably figured this out. But there is an online tutorial, and I've got the site there. And then it's important for you to know that any club officer who's listed in the portal as a club officer can make changes to the club membership and officer list. The only requirement is you got to have a working email, and because that's the way you get into that. You put in your email and then you put in your password. But if your email is not in there, you won't ever get into the portal. If your email is in there and you forget your password, you can always get a new one. And basically, it's a pretty simple process. If you go in, there are two rows. There's a row and a column, row across the top and a column down the left side. The row across the top of tabs, one of them says My Club. I think it says My Club, My District, My Council, My Region, My Council. You want to click on My Club. And then down the left-hand side, there's a list of actions you can take, and you want to go to Administer Roster. And you click on that. And if you're going to add a new member, there's a tab at the top once you've entered Administer Roster, and you add new member, and that's entering somebody brand new. If you're editing a current member, like their officers, they've changed officer position, or their email address has changed, or their mailing address, then there you go, scroll down, find that person, and click Edit the particular function that you want to change. And the only thing I think you need to remember here is this is a database. It's not like an Excel spreadsheet. So once you enter all the changes, if you don't go down to the bottom and save it, it never gets saved, it never gets entered there. It's unlike an Excel spreadsheet that way. So, and if you have any issues at all on how to use the portal, you can contact the Chicago office, and I've got their number there. Okay, probably the last major subject here, we thought we might have a sort of a discussion on dues collection. And I have, Bill Cook has shared his procedure that he uses in the Des Moines Club, and Jane Herrera has shared her procedure. These are on pages 6A and 6B and 6C. And Bill, do you want to talk just briefly about how you handle dues collection? Bill is a very effective treasurer in terms of collecting dues for the Des Moines Club.
Thank you, Mike. Usually I wait until I get the printout from Serra USA of our membership around the 10th of June or the 10th of December. Once I get that printout, I record on that printout those members who are prepaid for the next 6 months, so I don't send them another invoice. Otherwise, then once I determine who's going to get invoices, I email to all those who I can email to that have emails. We're still down to about 10 members, older members that just don't either have email capabilities or they don't read their emails, whatever.
Yeah, Bill, it might be worth commenting that the Des Moines Club has about 125 members, so it's a big club.
Right. And as Mike mentioned earlier, about 3-4 years ago, it occurred to me that when we have events, we fail to report back to the members how successful they were and so forth, because we don't have a newsletter. So that's why I thought I'll use the dues invoice as a communication tool of the highlights we had during the past year regarding priest dinner, sister's dinner, bishop's dinner, whatever. And that way the members can feel that, you know, their money's being spent and used in the proper ways. And in that same memo that goes out, dues invoice, I indicated we'd like to have, if possible, a additional donation for our seminars for our seminarians for their birthdays. And I've been amazed. I've been doing it now for 5 years. Every 6 months, I get another $600 to $700 coming in above and beyond the dues amount. So that's $1,200 to $1,300 a year. We got 20 seminarians times $50. So we're covering our costs and making even a little bit of money on it. And then I usually wait 30 days. So about the 10th of January, who hasn't paid, I'll send out a second notice, email again, and wait another 30 days and send out the third one. And after that, I may have to pick up the phone and call them. Or I may talk to another member who knows them well and say, tell Joe to get his invoice into me if you would, please. And so that's worked out quite well. Once in a while, I'll have somebody that goes the full 5-6 months and don't pay. So when I send out the dues notice the next time around, I'll send a special letter to them saying, I noticed you didn't pay for the last 6 months. So when you send in payment, include not only the current 6 months going forward, but the prior 6 months. And that usually has been pretty effective.
Thank you, Bill.
I guess the key thing I'd mention, Mike, is that remember, members join voluntarily. So don't get real tough with them regarding prompt payment of dues. We need to be very tactful. Thank you for being members and just encourage them to get payment in as soon as they can.
And this is from a guy that our club calls Guido. Jane Herrera, do you want to talk about your club and how you do things? You've got a sheet in here too.
Well, our club, I send a letter every 6 months, and I include in there what we have done with their money and what we plan to do with their money that's coming in. We charge $80 for a full member every 6 months, but we say this is what we are asking, but pay as you can. In other words, if you can pay more, we expect you to give more. If you can pay less, we expect you to, give as God has provided to you. So most of our members do give the $80, but a lot of them give $100 or more. And so every collection period, we've gained, I'd say, at least $300 more than we asked for. So it's worked out. It's worked out very well for us, saying pay as you are able. It's worked out very well, and that way we haven't lost members who cannot afford to pay, and they don't feel upset because they can't afford to pay.
Right.
You know what I mean? They can't pay the full thing, but that's fine with us. So, Yeah, there you go.
Great, thank you. Anybody else out there want to share different approaches or have any questions?
I guess I have a question, Mike, on the last comment. On those that are like in arrears and behind, you set a time limit? I mean, I'm just a little curious how you make that work.
You're talking about Jane's approach, pay as you can?
Pay as you can.
Jane, do you want to answer that?
Well, pay as you're able. They can all pay. They can all pay because even if they give $5, that's fine with us. In other words, so everybody pays. We never have anybody in arrears. They all pay up.
But the amount that goes.
It's a lot closer to kind of a donation concept trip, but with a suggested amount that people know what covers the real expense if they can.
That's correct.
I'm just the accountant to me is trying to figure out how that actually works when you have dues you have to pay every year, every quarter.
Well, it basically, yeah, go ahead, Jane.
I'm just saying the Lord provides. In other words, we have plenty of people who will give over what we ask, and we've always come out way ahead, always.
Excellent.
Any other questions or comments?
Mike, this is Tom Russell from the Serra Club of Omaha. What we do is we have, about 100 members, and about 50% of our members pay by ACH deposit. And that's a monthly draw on their bank account. And then the other 50%, we send a quarterly statement, and then they pay from there, send a check in.
So for the ACH, you don't really have a dues collection issue.
No, everybody's current.
Okay, yeah, that's great. That's great. That's good use of that. I'd not heard of that. Anybody else?
Well, we charge, this is Jay from San Bernardino, we charge $160 for a single person a year, but that only is about $13 a month. And so when we initially sign the members or discuss it, we discuss the amount that it is, $13 a month. And if you go to McDonald's or somewhere else, you're going to pay that much. So if you value
Yeah,
it.
that's a great, I think putting it on a monthly basis makes a lot of sense. Thanks, Jay. Anybody else?
Mike, this is
Richard
Candace.
Layton here from Kansas City, Kansas. I just want to highlight that we use QuickBooks for our invoicing. And then when someone comes in and is not able to pay the full dues, then we just issue a discount for the difference. And then also, like on the direct deposit, we do have a couple of folks on that that did not ever get it changed from, we raised our dues about 2 years ago by $10. And so that person continues to pay the old dues, and we give a discount every year because we're happy to get the money.
Right. Good approach.
Mike?
Okay, I'll take one last comment. Candace?
Mike, I was going to say, someone asked how do we manage $95 a year per person, and you can also pay $47.50 a half a year, which I think is very manageable for anyone to pay. And
Yep.
Like for gifts, we don't have food, as I said. They volunteer to bring snacks if we have meetings that we at the halls. And also, like, we gave our new seminarians chalices, the Molina chalice from Spain, that they give donations. And we've had enough donations to give those chalices. They're not mandatory donations, but whoever wants to give. And also our 35 archdiocesan the seminarians, I'm sorry, I can't even think. The seminarians, we gave them at Christmas time $175 each. That was, yeah, they were so happy. So we
all funded through donations, right, Candace?
all funded, yes, all funded through donations, and the seminarians were very happy at the generous gifts. So that's how we operate.
I think a lot of clubs basically charge minimal dues and then rely on the generosity of their members with donations, which is, it's sort of another way of saying, it's sort of another way of saying, you pay what you're able to, or what God's given you. And it works pretty well, I think, as a general rule. Okay, I'm going to cut off the discussion there just in the interest of time. And I've got some questions here I'm just catching up with that I want to make clear here. Somebody asked a question, is the 990N the same as the 990EZ? It is not. The N is so simple, and the EZ is a multi-page document. So you want to try and use the 990N if you can. Let's see here. There's some other comments, but I don't have time to go through all these. Bob Campney made a comment here that Serra clubs are not required to be audited. The Serra International and the U.S. Council are audited. And I think somebody asked about changing their tax year. Bob, is that something a club can do?
It is. It can do. In the older days, when 990EZ was being filed, you actually had to file, if you wanted to change it from May to December, you'd have to file a 7-month return to get you up to December. And then you could start filing again. And there's queries on that filing that you would identify you're changing year end. With a 990N, the return is so simple that it doesn't have room for that. So it then I know it's there, I've seen it, there's a request to change year end, but I just don't recommend it. The easiest thing, I would say 90% of our clubs are May 31. If you want to report to your board on a calendar year basis, I don't care if your revenue is 5,000 or 35,000 or 45,000. You don't have to have your same reporting to the board as you do for your tax. So
That's right.
It's just real simple to go in on June, first month into the next year, and file your 990N. Very simple.
Okay, thank you. Okay, last thing, we're out of time, so I want to just thank everybody for being treasurers, for being Serrans, and for all you do for vocations and the ministry of priesthood and consecrated life in the Catholic Church. And I took it on myself to try and write a prayer for treasurers. And I thought maybe we'd end with this prayer. So here's the prayer. In the name of the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Lord Jesus Christ, grant me the grace to be a good steward of my club's financial resources, patient and understanding, yet persistent in collecting dues from our members, timely and accurate in making deposits and paying approved expenses, helpful with financial guidance to make future club events successful, gracious in accepting financial gifts to our club, and joy-filled by the knowledge that my work, especially the most tedious and detailed, is indispensable to the success of my club in achieving the Serra mission. Amen. In the name of the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Amen. So with that, I think I'm going to call the meeting to a halt or to quits, but I'm going to leave it on if there's questions that I haven't answered that people want to discuss here. We had, I think we had 87 people that attended this meeting, which is impressive.
88, actually. Ed Terrell was here the whole time on the other sofa, so you can count him too. He was listening and commenting.
Was he asleep or was he awake?
He was awake. He was making comment. He thought it was very good. He just went upstairs, but he was here the whole time. So.
Okay, great. Anybody else have any questions or comments before I
start? Yes. Mike, I do. Ralph Hoible from Denver. Has there been any talk at the U.S. Council level of increasing the dues anytime, or is that rumors? Or
there has not. There has not, and I think that it's not impossible that it could come up in the future. You know, the issue for us is that we're dealing with a slowly declining membership, and we've basically cut the staff to absolute minimum, in my opinion. There are people that are arguing to add to staff in Chicago. I don't think there is enough support for that to happen at this point. If that did, it would take some kind of additional financing to make it happen. But as much as I know, Ralph, I think that the goal right now is to try and operate with the funds that we have under the current due structure and to adjust expenses accordingly.
And improve our membership.
Yeah, improving the membership would help a lot. That's right.
Okay.
Mike, that's what I remember also at the U.S. board meeting, that they would stay the same because of declining membership.
Yep. Okay, thanks, Candace. Anybody else?
Hey, Mike, there was a question in there. Oh, maybe that's not a question. We created a treasurer's job description too, didn't we? Is that on these slides?
Oh, it is. They're actually, I should have gone one more slide. I had to.
Okay.
We actually have 3 documents. We have the new member application form is attached to the document, support documents. There's a club transfer form in case somebody moves from one club to another. And the last one is the club treasurer position. I'm sorry I didn't make mention of those while the meeting was still going here.
And you know, and that treasurer job description is something we worked on to create so that there's a guide. Clearly, clubs will change the way they have their treasurer work, but it's a guide.
Yeah, that's right. And it was also prepared at the same time as this presentation, so they parallel each other very well.
Right.
Okay, with that, I'll call the meeting to an end. I'm gonna end the recording. And